Everybody, please stand. I'm gonna call the board of the town board for commissioners meeting. I'm gonna do the invocation and Chief, you would lead us in the pledge, please.
Yes,
That
sir.
is correct. Kind Heavenly Father, we come to you, Lord, as humbly as we know how, just thanking you, God, for every blessing of life that you bestow upon us. The health and strength that you bless us with from day to day, we're so thankful. We thank you, Lord, for giving us this opportunity to be able to come together to work, do the work for the town as a town board of commissioners. May we do it that would be pleasing to our citizens and pleasing in your sight. Bless those now, Lord, that are in the hospitals, rest homes, wherever they may be, and especially those that's dealing with this COVID issue. I know some personally, and I'm sure maybe everybody here does. Just be with them and comfort them and bless their families also. Lead, guide, and direct us as we go through this. Forgive us from our faults and failures. Pray this prayer in Christ Jesus' holy name. Amen. Raise the flag, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty, item number 4, additions, deletions to the agenda.
I just have the amended item G that Debbie handed out to you. And I have an additional handout once we get to item H. But other than that, no changes to the agenda.
Okay. Need a motion to approve the agenda as stated.
I make a motion to approve the agenda, Mayor, as stated.
Motion and a second. Any further questions, comments? Being none, all those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Pose like sign, and opposed, motion carries. Now. Item number 6. Awards and recognitions. Got a great one. Great. Mr. Dale Schumer, would you please come forward, please? How you doing, sir?
Good, how you, Mayor?
I'm good. Even though I'd like you to stay here longer, but time moves on, doesn't it?
Sure does.
Okay, this is a proclamation declaring September the 1st, 2021 as Silas Dale Shoemake Day in North Wilkesboro, North Carolina. Whereas Silas Dale Shoemake will retire from the services of the town of North Wilkesboro on September the 1st, 2021. And whereas Dale began his public service career in 1981 with the town of North Wilkesboro as a part-time laborer. And whereas in 1983, he became a full-time laborer. And between that year and 2007, worked his way up through the ranks, holding increasingly responsibility positions with the town's utility department. In 2007, he was named Director of Public Utilities. And whereas in 2010, Dale was named Director of Public Services, a new department which combined the town's public utilities and public works departments. In this role, he was endowed with oversight responsibility of all water, wastewater treatment functions, utility maintenance and road maintenance, landscape maintenance, solid waste collection, and fleet functions. And whereas in spring 2019, Dale simultaneously served as Director of Public Services and interim town manager, and whereas Dale also served with the North Wilkesboro Fire Department upon his retirement, serving as assistant chief and previously serving as acting chief. And whereas Dale's career has been long and fulfilled, his leadership honorable. His work for the people of North Wilkesboro personifies the spirit of public service and is worthy of recognition. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Robert Johnson, Mayor of North Wilkesboro, on behalf of the Board of Commissioners of the town of North Wilkesboro, past and present, do hereby proclaim September the 1st, 2021, as Silas Dale Shoemake Day in the town of North Wilkesboro, and commend its observance to all residents. Now therefore be it further resolved that a copy of this proclamation suitably engrossed be given to Dale Shoemake, retiring Director of Public Service for the town of North Wilkesboro. Proclaim this day, this 26th day of August, 2021. Robert Dale Johnson, Mayor. Dale? Not quite through yet, Dale.
Sure.
Okay. This is something I think you will enjoy for the rest of your days. We have been able to give these out to other folk in retirement and special proclamations. And I'm going to present this to you. And I'll get it unwrapped and opened up. It is a beautiful, beautiful clock. In appreciation to Dale Shoemake for your 36 years of service, 36 years of faithful and dedicated service to the people of our town, October 20th, 1983 through September the 1st, 2021.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir. You deserve it. Stick it back in there.
I don't remember what time you think of that.
That's it. Y'all were good, sir.
You were there.
Yes, you were a brave man, and you agreed. What was the year to basically take two jobs?
About 10, 11 years ago.
Yeah, and we were in a very tough time
Right.
fiscally, and we had lost a lot of income with some businesses closing down, and we're in a difficult spot. And you really helped us by being willing to combine your job, and thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Angela?
Bill, I'm crazy upset you're leaving, but I know you guys are gonna have a wonderful time, do a lot of vacations and have a lot of fun, and don't even give us another thought.
Sure.
Thank you. Just thank you for taking care of this town and taking care of all the things that you have and your service all these years. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Andrew, I think you're on, aren't you?
Yeah, Dale, thank you for all your hard work and service and loyalty to the town over the years, and you're going to be missed. And I hope you have a great retirement. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll just say just a few words of thank you. I'd like to thank the Lord. My 40 years with the town, I've never been out with a major illness or major sickness. The Lord's really blessed me. It's been a good career here with the town. Everyone's treating me well. You've got a fabulous bunch of workers. Everything will go fine. They all know their jobs. They kept me looking good for a lot of years. Yeah. But I do appreciate everything everybody's done for me and my family for standing behind. Thank you.
Mayor, can I say something?
Sure.
They are now to a friend that I worked for 40 years. And he's always took care of me. But we're gonna miss it.
Jimmy, you ain't blown that over yet. Stay on the fire department a while.
I know. But I appreciate all you done for the past.
But we have had a good relationship over the years. thank
Yeah,
you.
we have. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I think Dale's had a good relationship with everyone just because that's his personality. He's real easygoing, he's skilled in many trades, and he's sneaky smart too. And when you combine that with his years of experience and his years of wisdom, that makes for the kind of public servant that you're gonna have a hard time replacing. But fortunately, Dale is so filled with the spirit of public service that I think he's gonna stay involved with the fire department, right? So we'll still see him, he'll still be part of the North Wilkesboro family, and we're grateful for that. So thank you, Dale, for all your work. Congratulations, enjoy your retirement.
Thank you, Russ.
Chief,
Mr. Mayor, Dale, I just want to say thank you for everything you've done for me over the years. You know, even when I started here with the town, I knew that I could call you, and I have called you at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning and said, Dale, snow's getting deep, and he'd say, we're running, we're on our way. But just thank you for always being there when I needed you.
Thank you, Chief.
anybody else in the audience want to make a comment, feel free to do so.
Mayor, I will.
Okay.
Again, Bill, we appreciate you through the EDC. He's been there anytime I've needed him, if the company called and I needed information or I needed a referral to get to the right place, the right contact. If Bill didn't take care of it with either himself or someone on his team here within the town, and you always, came to give me guidance, and I appreciate that, and our companies appreciate it.
Always enjoy it. Thank you.
So Mayor, he's got a few more days before he officially retires, but can we allow him to retire from commission meetings a little early today?
If people would like to do that, feel free to do so.
Do it if you can. You know what?
Thank y'all very much.
That moves us into item number 7, public comments. I've got one, Chris McVern.
Bernie?
Bernie?
Yeah.
McBurney, is that
That's
it?
it, yep. Do I come up there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I face the TV or?
Just ready or we come?
Okay, so my name is Chris McBurney. I live on 6th Street, 702. And a lot of us are concerned about the traffic, the amount of traffic and the speed of the traffic on our road. Just since we moved in 2012, and just since then, personally, I've witnessed a lady crash into and snap a telephone pole in front of our house. She was going up the hill. We witnessed a golden retriever puppy get hit by a passing car while it was getting walked by its family. The car didn't even stop. We don't let our children play outside in the front because of how dangerous the road is. It's also a huge concern when I have to cut the grass, which is about, in the summertime, every 2 weeks, with cars flying up the road as I'm trying to weed whack or move the blower or move the mower or blow the leaves or whatever out of the way. It's also very dangerous pulling into our house or pulling out for us. And I'm sure it is for everybody else on the road. And I did some research on my own using the DOT's website, and I found a state mapping traffic volume map that states in 2016 there were 4,900 cars on average per day using 6th Street. On Main Street, there's only between 3,800 to 4,300, so we've got more traffic on our road than Main Street. We also have more traffic than Highway 18 between Lenore and Wilkesboro, and between North Wilkesboro and Statesville, they only have 2,500. So the amount of traffic is a huge issue. And the other thing is that I realized the other day was the width of the road between the tarmac and the yellow line at our house. It's 14 feet from the edge of the tarmac to the yellow line. And most interstates are only 12-foot max. The the average car is only 7 foot wide, and the average local road should only be about 9 foot wide if it's residential. I know that you've talked about adding a bike lane, which, you know, anything to make the road narrower or any improvement we can get, we're grateful for, but we don't know if a bike lane will cause people to actually slow down, because I don't think that many people are gonna ride their bike down 6th Street. And we're worried that people will just ride over that line and it's really not gonna make much of a difference. When I take my dogs on a walk, I have to cross the street 4 or 5 times because the sidewalk ends, then it begins again, and then it ends, and then it begins. If you ever look at that road, it 4 or 5 times I've got to cross the street. There's no crosswalk, there's no sidewalk on both sides the full way up. And I'm just concerned that, you know, someone's gonna get hit there, or, you know, it could be any one of us that are pulling in and out of our driveways, get hit by a car, or us walking the dog hit by a driver. So that's my concern, and I just wanted to let you guys know, and thanks for the time.
Thank you. Comments? All right,
Mr. McBurney, if you will stay for about another 5 or 10
Okay.
minutes, I've got some information on your map.
Okay.
consent agenda. Number 8.
Mayor, I think you can make a single motion to approve all three of the consent agenda, but I do have one question to the town manager. Do you believe that the purchasing policy exception needs to be discussed openly, or are we good? I mean, I'm good with it, but do we need to, because of the nature of it, do you think we need to just hear it openly?
I think that would be helpful for transparency, yes.
All right, so, Mr. Mayor, I would like to pull item B out for separate discussion. But then I would like to make a motion that item A and item C of the consent agenda be approved.
Motion,
I'll second the motion.
second. Any other discussion? Being none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Not none opposed. Okay, let's see. Wilson, you want to put this down? I can get through.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna explain item B right now.
Okay.
So item B is asking the board to approve an exception to the town's purchasing policy prohibiting doing business with employee-owned companies. Because we have an employee, a volunteer firefighter, whose full-time job is to repair diesel motors, and we have the need for diesel repair. And his quote is significantly lower than the traditional shop that we go to. It's for a fire truck, and so it needs to be done quickly. And so that's why we haven't gotten 10 bids, why we've only gotten 2. State law only prohibits doing business with employees who have a role in creating or administering the contract, and he doesn't. He's just the guy who's going to repair. He didn't identify the need, the scope of the work, or anything like that. He's just a mechanic. So the only administrative hurdle we have to go over is our own policy, which requires that the board approve doing business with employees. So I'm asking the board to grant that exception with this action.
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the exception to the town's purchasing policy, granting permission to use an employee-owned vendor for the repair of modules for a fire department truck.
Okay, your motion, I need a second. Motion in a second. Any other discussions or questions or comments? Being none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Right.
Those like sign. Opposed, motion carries. Okay. Moving on, Danny. Item number 9. Managers report. Last attorney, you got anything else?
Yes, sir. I've got 3 things to report. 2 good news stories and 1 challenging discussion. The first news story has to do with our traffic calming work. So the area of Mr. McBurney is concerned. As he reported, we are going to install a bike lane on 6th Street to both make that street more accommodating to other forms of travelers, in this case cyclists. I agree with him that the sidewalks on that road are kind of haphazard, and so I think in the future we might want to see what we can do about that. But for the moment, we can create a bike lane for cyclists. That'll double as what we call a pinch, which will narrow the lanes and hopefully give motorists the impression that they're in a confined space that calls them to slow down. But that alone probably is not going to solve the speed and volume matter on that road. And so the second project we're going to do is realign the intersection at 6th and Henshaw so it becomes a 4-way stop. We're also going to square off the corner of Henshaw southbound onto 6th Street so that you can't carry your speed quickly around the corner and down the hill. You got to come to a complete stop and make a 90-degree turn onto 6th Street. We reported this to you all a while ago. We hired a vendor and then waited because of the paint and supply shortage that's going on in the economy right now. But our vendor tells us that he's now got access to the supplies he needs and can start restriping the road the week of September 7th. So expect to see him out there soon. We hope that he can do most of the work at night, but this is a notification to motorists that you might see temporary traffic realignment that week while we're making that alignment. The other thing you'll notice is that our speed sign is out there on 6th Street now, collecting data on speeds and volumes, and it'll be out there for a few weeks after the intersection is realigned so that we can compare speed and data and see if it's worked, see if the treatment's worked. So we are moving forward with our physical realignment on 6th Street to hopefully provide some relief to the neighbors for the speeding and traffic volumes that are going on there. So that's my first piece of good news. My second piece of good news is, I guess maybe we should have asked Dale to wait for this one, but Jimmy's here, and I want to acknowledge both him and Dale for their successful application to FEMA for our new aerial fire truck. I've reported this to the board, but I'm repeating it here so that the public can hear. This week, we were notified that our application was accepted, and FEMA will be giving us a $950,000 grant that we can use to replace our aging aerial fire truck. That truck looks beautiful, but it's not very useful anymore. It requires a lot of maintenance. It's got an open cab design that OSHA doesn't permit us to use, and it's got some other technical deficiencies that Jimmy could tell you about. And so we needed to replace it for a while, and this is going to help us do that. We probably would have had to replace it on our own dime if we hadn't gotten this FEMA money, and that would have really strained our revenues. So this is a great relief to the town's finances that will have some help with the truck. We suspect that a new truck spec like we need is going to cost $1.3 million. So we'll still have some skin in the game, but it'll be much more doable than it would have been otherwise. And we've already identified in our budget discussions back in the spring, the majority of where our $350,000 or so contribution is going to come from. And Connie and I, over the next week or so, will put together a recommendation on where the rest is going to come from. And we'll bring that to you at the next meeting and ask you to accept the grant and accept our recommendation on where our contribution will come from. So congratulations to Jimmy, Dale, the grant writer, Robbie Boland, everyone at the fire department who worked on this grant application. Appreciate y'all. Thanks for your work. All right, so that's my good news. Now the bad news. It appears that the lull in cases that we experienced over the spring and early summer was the eye of the storm. And now the other side of the hurricane is hitting us, and the COVID winds are starting to whip again. If you've looked at the dashboard today, you will see that since yesterday, over the last 24 hours, the state has had 8,620 new cases. That's the highest number since February. Here in Wilkes, we're averaging 44 new cases a day. Our local percent positive rate is 16.5%. Statewide, it's 13. These are frightening numbers. I bring this up for a couple of reasons. First, it's starting to affect our workforce again. We've got 2 people on our green thumb crew out, and depending on one of them's test results, we might have 2 more out. So if you start to see the grass growing a little higher and our crew's getting behind on the landscaping, that's why. It's only affecting them for now, but you never know when it could hit another department and affect our services there. So this is just notice to the board and to the constituents that our workforce is being hit. Second, we might need to switch back to virtual meetings for the foreseeable future. Fortunately, I see everyone's doing well and wearing a mask here, but the safest thing would be to go back to a virtual setting. The degree that Delta is more contagious than the original virus means that social distancing doesn't help as much as it did. So switching back to virtual is probably the safest solution. So I'll plant that seed with the board and ask y'all to consider that. Third, I also ask that you start to prepare yourselves for the possibility of mandating vaccination among our employees. It's a trend among large employers. Just about every day of the week, we hear about another large employer who's requiring that their employees be vaccinated. And frankly, it might be the only way to move the needle on vaccination rates in the community. I'd like for the board to sort of think of it differently than we have been. You know, this whole book right here is safety policy for the town. And in that safety policy, we do things like require certain workers to wear steel-toed boots, require some workers to wear gloves or eye protection. Drivers of city vehicles aren't allowed to speed or drive without a seatbelt. This is a vivid analogy, but employees aren't allowed to drink alcohol at work because it could endanger them or their colleagues. Yet none of those actions are thought to be an impingement on someone's freedom. They're there to keep the employee and their colleagues safe, just like the vaccine is. So I think we need to think of vaccines in the same way. So please start thinking about that, because I think that's coming down the pipe. Fourth, tomorrow, local government leaders, in our case, me, the mayor, and Commissioner Johnson, are going to meet with Rachel Willard and leaders from the other municipality or other municipalities and county government entities to consider amending our local state of emergency. Up until recently, most local states of emergency aligned with the governor's executive order. But recently, we've seen a trend among counties and municipalities of creating their own orders that, for example, require masks indoors. I haven't seen a lot of municipalities do capacity limits or anything like that earlier. Most of them are centered on masks, but I haven't looked at all of them, so there might be a few that are like that. So anyway, I think that the reason why Ms. Willard called this meeting is because she thinks it's time for the governments to take action to fight the rising number of cases. So the three of us will attend and report to you all what was discussed. But I think we're getting to the point where we can't sit on our hands anymore. So that's my report. I'm sorry I had to end it on such a down note. But I think that we're going to have to pivot once again and start focusing on getting through the pandemic and maybe putting aside some of our other priorities for now until we can get the case counts down again. So that's my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have any questions? Any comments?
I would like to thank you, Wilson, for your traffic calming ideas and your actions. That's something I don't think many of us have ever thought of through the years. We know the traffic is an issue. We've done the things we could afford and have known to do, and it is a huge problem. It's a multifaceted problem. There is no one action that's gonna help it, or we would probably at least be working on that action. I think the action that will be most effective is when North Carolina Department of Transportation builds a bypass around North Wilkesboro. Because it's clear that's where a lot of that traffic is coming from 18 north, 268 east, over to 421, and back again in each day from the airport. Think about the Samaritan's Purse folks who still live in Boone. That's how they get from the airport to back to Boone. So it is multifaceted, it's expensive. There is no easy answer to that problem, and I appreciate your work to find vertical solutions that may help. Won't be perfect, but it will help. Neptune grant is a great thing. Thank you for you guys working on that.
Anybody else? Moving right on, down to, public hearing. I believe you're involved in this. Is that correct? You have some,
Yes, sir. And she's got Mick Zulpo, who's the proprietor of the AMC Entertainment, also known as doing business as The Block. And I think we'd like to have his 3 minutes in the public hearing too.
Good.
Want us to come forward or?
Sure.
Okay.
Before you get started, let me.
All right, great. I know that you have in your packets, a kind of an overview of the project. And Mick and Ansley, his wife, have chosen to start a company called The Block, which is a family fun center. It is listed as AMZ Amusements as far as setting the business up for registration, but he actually completed a naming contest, and so we have learned more about it over the last month. At the town square is where the building will be located, and it's great to see this come into the community. I know it's something that for economic development that we have heard for many years that we needed more for families to have entertainment and a place to take their children. But I also think this just adds to the walkability of downtown that parents can possibly, I feel like they're going to feel safe enough to leave their children because there's going to be programs for that, and maybe be able to get out and shop and do downtown restaurants and things of that nature. And so we feel like this is going to probably cause tourism to increase from all of our surrounding counties. And we feel like Mick would be very successful. However, during the process of working on the town square, it first started out as a small concept, maybe would phase up slowly over time. And I believe Mick has just jumped in and Ansley and said, let's just go all the way and get all of our vision come to reality. And so his investment is around $100,000 in real property, $300,000 in personal property. And I believe there's a discussion about purchasing the building later on, but currently leasing maybe. And so that's wonderful. We're so glad that he and Ansley are investing in our community. Looks like we would have around 23 jobs, and of course that'll phase up over the years with 2 or 3 full-time and the remainder being around part-time jobs. Average wages is part of this program for the small business grant, is that we're looking at their average wages for the type of jobs and the type of business that it is. And their average wages do meet the investment that we're looking for, and exceeds that investment dollar-wise is $250,000 is the threshold and 5 jobs. So both in the investment of $400,000 as well as the 23 jobs that'll occur that exceeds the requirements for the small business grant. And so the Wilkes Economic Development has recommended to you that you consider potentially allowing the block to have a small business grant, which would be $2,500. And I believe that the county is also looking forward to matching that. They will be calling for a public hearing and having a vote probably later in October to allow for advertising. And so Mick is with us. If you would like to hear from Mick for maybe just a few minutes and then see if you have any questions.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Mick Zulpo. Originally born and raised in Australia, as you could probably tell. But my wife's a native North Carolinian. We were living in the greater Raleigh area down in Fuquay, and had a holiday home up in the Buck Mountain community. So and my wife's an App State grad. So we've been part-time residents in the county for 5 years and full-time residents for the last 18 months. When our kids went to virtual school with Wake County, we decided to come up and stay up here and take the opportunity as a family to spend time in a beautiful place. And come the end of last year, decided we wanted to stay. It's too nice to get on those beautiful views of the sunsets up there. And part of our relocation here was looking for things for our children to do. Aiden's here with us. He's our 12-year-old at West Wilkes, and Dean's our 9-year-old at Mount Pleasant. And we found as a family, there weren't the family entertainment options that we were used to in Raleigh. So we investigated, got in touch with Leanne and some other people throughout the town, Meredith and so forth, and looked at this as something that maybe we could do as being new members of the community and hopefully bringing something that we know is very, very much needed in the community. With Leanne's team's help, we've been able to promote the business and have the naming competition, which was hugely successful. We had a Facebook Live event announcing the winner that's had over 22,000 people view that video, which is crazy numbers. And it's not only that, it's been the comments on the public forum from everybody in the community, just offering words of support, offering good wishes, and offering comments that this has been well overdue for our community here. So we're very excited to do this. And we're going to bring trampolines, birthday rooms, roller skating, Ninja Warrior, putt-putt, and all those things that will surprisingly take everyone from the small toddlers. We're going to have a small toddler room for kids 4 and under with soft play, things like that. Everyone through to, honestly, unexpected customers. We've had many comments on the social media from the older generation requesting senior skate nights. So not exactly the customer base that I thought we'd attract, but I'm glad we're capturing everybody in the community, and everybody's sees that there's going to be something for them to do and be involved with. So appreciate your consideration for the grant money. My wife and I have invested a substantial amount of our own personal finances, and we've been very lucky to partner with some local banks here. First National to help us, so but any little bit helps. We're pushing as hard as we can to get open, provided what happens with COVID. We thought we were over that, but so appreciate your time and more than willing and happy to answer any questions, or if anyone would like to see what we're doing, please come down and knock on our window, and we'll gladly show you where we're up to. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's wonderful that you're doing this with the younger generation, younger people. Tying pretty good, I think, with the building part of the old American Drew office building. I think they have a baseball and basketball, so this should pair in pretty good together, which has been going on for some time now.
And successful, I think. Yeah.
It's been very successful.
Yeah.
I think yours will be too.
I think we will, and our intention here is we know we're going to be a very visible part of the community. We're obviously hoping that, as Leanne said, we're not only going to service our local town and local county, but we do realize there's limited resources like this in Ash, in Watauga, in Allegheny. So we may be able to bring families in from this entire part of the state, not only to come and visit us, but hopefully they'll spend some other money at some other businesses here in town, whether it's JT's Barbecue across the corner from us, or wander down to the antique mall and buy something to take home. So hopefully this will be an economic benefit for everybody in town.
Before we declare that public hearing, you guys want to comment on?
I'm excited, y'all. I've been in a business, a boutique downtown for 22 years. And the thoughts of all of those mothers dropping them off to you and coming to me is exciting. And it's exciting for every retailer, business, you name it. Drop by, it's the place you want to get your haircut or whatever. But we're excited that you put your hard-earned money and you are feeling good and and we're so glad you're here.
We couldn't be more thankful for the response we've got. I think I travel the world for work usually, and I've lived in 6 countries and been to 54 countries. And there's definitely a reason why I chose to live here. It's beautiful up here. I love the people. It's small town. That's where I grew up in Australia. My wife grew up in Carey, was small town, not anymore. So we're excited to be part of a community and bring something like this, as you know, is needed. And give families those opportunities, you know, to drop the kids off and go have a date night, or things that are unavailable to people right now. And hopefully that'll not only offer opportunities for business people like you, but can we attract other people to come into our town as well?
I want to thank you for taking a chance on us in our
Thank
community.
you. Yep, it's a little scary, to be honest with you, but we're excited, and hopefully we can build something that's fun for us as a family business to do as well. I'd much rather be hanging out with kids, jumping on trampolines, than being on a flight from Hong Kong all night.
I just hope you won't have an age limit on this trampoline.
Yeah, I want you to see you out there, first one.
For that laser tag thing.
Yeah.
You know, check out your frustration.
There you go.
Okay, before I declare out the public hearing motion, I love your accent too.
Thanks.
Okay, I declare out the public hearing.
Thank you.
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the $2,500 Small Business Development Incentive Grant to AUZ Entertainment.
All right. Motion and a second. Any other comments before we do? There being none, all those in favor, signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Those like sign, none opposed, motion carries. Thank you
Mr.
very
Mayor,
much.
there's one more ministerial action that's required.
Okay.
To approve a budget ordinance to reappropriate the bond.
Well, you need a motion for
Yes,
that?
sir.
Second part, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I make a motion to approve a 2,500 small business development
Sorry,
incentive.
one more. The last line.
Oh, the last one, okay. Look how that's so much. I make a motion to approve a budget ordinance to reappropriate dollars from reserves to operating fund to make an incentive payment.
Second.
All righty, that's great. Motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by stating aye. None opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. Now, on one. Okay. Moving on down, policy. Items, that would be Meredith and you, Wilson.
Yes, sir. So, give us a moment, let Meredith get on the screen here. We've also got the petitioner available. Meredith, if you could promote him. In case y'all want to hear from him or ask him a question. Being promoted now.
I think we we got everybody? So I'll get started. Okay, so before you tonight, item E, this is the Hidden River rezoning application. If you'd like, I can also share my screen for if you want to look at the maps or any of the other information in front of you. Just let me know and I will do so. For now, we'll do like the Brady Bunch TV. So a little background on your face page. We do talk about Hidden River, some of the history with it, different steps that have been taken over the past years were done on this property to essentially rezone it to a planned development conditional district. And essentially what we're looking at now is we would have to rezone the property out of the planned development conditional district into a R20 rural residential to just have a manufactured home park. Now the PUD did allow for manufactured homes to be placed, but treat the PUD as a subdivision. That's a different set of regulations. So before you tonight, we've got the rezoning request. This is the discussion part of the first half will be discussion, and then of course you would call for the public hearing. This is in regards to, for legal purposes, parcel ID 1402717. This is approximately 20.55 acres. They're requesting to go from PD, CD, which is the planned development conditional district, to an R20 rural residential. They no longer would like to have essentially the subdivision. They would only like to have a mobile home park. If we look at like the land use maps and zoning maps, most of the area is a mix of commercial, industrial, office. There is some residential. I'm going to share the screen here in a minute, but the town provides main water and sewer to this property, and then it becomes private. There's a 20-foot easement that runs off of Armory Road, and it goes into the property, and that's how it's accessed. One of the things that we would need to look at is, since it is a private water and sewers and fire service in that park, is what the capacity is to, potentially expand the park. Those are all state building code requirements. The zoning code, of course, mimics and echoes that language, but at the end of the day, it's state building code. So for the board's review criteria, and let me share this for you guys real quick. Okay, so in your agenda packet, you've got the staff report. And as you see on the map, the first consideration is our comprehensive plan. We show this area as in the burgundy color, which is actually considered high density residential multifamily, which the PUD met. So we would need to look at that with a manufactured home park. One of the things I mentioned earlier is what's in the area, what other properties are nearby, what are the zoning districts of what's nearby. That's in the second map excerpt. You can see we've got everything from industrial to residential to commercial. So it's a very broad mix. And then the next few things to consider is, we look at the past zoning, we look at the future zoning. So the past zoning was again, a PUD is what I'm going to call it, just for simplicity. It allowed for manufactured homes. It allowed for stick built. It allowed for modular homes. Moving into R20 and going with the manufactured home park would only allow for manufactured homes. I'm going to skip down to what does this do to the surrounding properties as a consideration. That's one of the things you want to look at. Now, this has been essentially a manufactured home park for many, many years. So it looks like it would continue that way. One of the other things we want to consider is this is within a floodplain. So there are some safety concerns with moving in homes in different areas in a floodplain. And then finally, spot zoning. So technically, if we go back to the map, the zoning map, the PUD was already spot zoning. Now spot zoning can be legal, you just have to defend it and essentially describe the state criteria for doing so. And that's something we could walk through when we get further down the road with this property. So staff recommended we could, rezoning it is allowed. This would probably be the first R20 zoning district we would have in town limits. The intent of R20 is to be essentially in a rural area, but that is the only zoning district we have that allows for manufactured home parks. There is when you go through a manufactured home park permitting process, we have what's called supplemental standards, and those are additional standards that have to be met before zoning permits will be issued. It limits how many homes you can have per acre. It limits, you have to have like a manager on site. There's trash, there's road, there's sewer, there's water considerations to make sure that the park is safe for the residents. So we've got a map in the packet. It's a little bit zoomed in for you all. We've got the application, and I think also we've got the letter that's several pages long, explaining the situation and what the opportunities are with this property to Mr. DiCarlo. Did anyone have any questions for me at this time?
Meredith, what was the recommendation of the planning board?
Yes, let me get to that. So planning board met on the 12th. They recommended approval. They notated it was consistent with our comp plan because essentially it results in the development of a residentially zoned site to become conforming to the land use that it is. And they considered it reasonable in the public's interest. And it was unanimous.
Are there certain conditions that Mr. Carlo will have to meet if we were to grant this request as noted? Will there be, what will be Mr. Carlo's process if this is rezoned?
Okay, so they have applied for what's called a straight rezoning. So the board cannot put any conditions on the rezoning. Our zoning ordinance now calls conditions are called supplemental standards due to 160D. And let me share that with you on the screen. It's in the packet, but this would be a lot easier. Okay, so when you have we've got a mix of things going on here. We've got a non-conforming use. So non-conforming use cannot be expanded unless it comes into conformity with today's codes. So today's codes, I've got them on the screen. It talks about R20 rural residential allows for these manufactured homes if all of these standards are met. So you've got management requirements, how many homes, essentially the spacing of the homes. There's signage, E911 address requirements, how the homes can be set up on the site, utilities, roadways all have to be adequate to get essentially fire trucks in and the residents in. And we address all water systems because usually this is in our ETJ. So whether it's well, a septic, town water, town sewer. Additionally, there's garbage requirements also. And you can have private roadways, which is the case on this property. They just have to be 25 feet wide and they need to be in good condition because, like I mentioned, you've got trash trucks, garbage trucks, other vehicles trying to get in there to service these residents. So those are essentially the requirements to get the park into compliance.
I understand there is a particular number of existing units in the park right now, correct?
Yes.
And what is the potential growth to the park? And if we grant this, what happens to the new tenants versus what happens to the existing tenants?
So the existing tenants' homes are already established. Like I mentioned, they're non-conforming. They just continue on. They don't have to like move or rearrange or do anything to them. But whenever you bring in a new home, essentially the park has to start becoming into compliance. So that's where we need to figure out water systems, sewer systems, proper management, proper garbage pickup, proper roads. So that's where the nonconformity with the existing homes continues. But the moment you bring in a new home, it's considered an expansion of the park, and that is where the requirements kick in. So, and there's also a clause that has, let's see here, how many units per acre. So give me one moment. Let's see, okay, so item B under 11.7-7, it states that you can have up to, it has to be a minimum 2-acre tract, which this is, it's 20. And you can have 4 acres per gross acre. I mean, 4 homes per gross acre. So you could potentially put a number of homes in there. Now, one of the things that is going to be challenging on this site is there are a number of easements, and it's also within the floodplain. So even though you might be able to put 80 homes in there by the zoning ordinance, the easements and the essentially floodplain are going to restrict that.
There's a pretty significant restriction caused by those easements. Is that right?
Right, so there's 2 different power easements. There's a gas easement. We hold a stormwater and a sewer easement. They're all different widths. They crisscross through the park. They would need to be verified. As I don't know if Blue Ridge Engineering is still holding those easements, and Duke Energy is holding those easements, and the Frontier Natural Gas is the other one.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we call for a public hearing on this zoning request for October the 6th, 2021.
You hear the motion? And a second.
I did get the date right, correct?
Hold on, I'm checking.
It's October 5th. And then did you have any questions for the applicant, because he is online?
The 5th.
I amend my motion to change it to October the 5th.
I'll amend my second.
You got it right now. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion or comments or questions?
I think Mr. DeCarlo wanted to say something.
Yes, sir.
Hold on, we got to unmute him here. Meredith, can you unmute?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Meredith, it's hard for me to hear. I'm sorry, obviously I'm on a Zoom call, but I just, a couple things I want to clarify, and it's not semantics. I think it's important that we are not expanding the park. We are not doing that. All we are doing is reestablishing the park. We have no intentions of putting in 18 trailers. In fact, given the some of the restrictions, and just to keep it a community that is not, inundated with trailers, we may add 7 trailers. As I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, and Mr. Bennett owned this property at one point. I think he had 30 trailers. We have 23. So all we're really doing is trying to reestablish what's there. And so I don't want to be burdened with restrictions just to put trailers back in. So I'm not expanding. I'm not going on the lots that aren't there. I'm trying to put homes that are already back there. And in some cases, one of the conditions becomes problematic. And I don't know if this is a staff discussion. I don't want to take commissioners' time. But Meredith, one of the things in my letter to you and the commissioners is you're talking about putting trailers perpendicular. I can't put them perpendicular. I can put them parallel like they have been before. So, and then, with the streets, what do I put the streets for all the whole thing? If I bring one trailer in, do I have to do all the streets for one trailer? So there's a little bit of ambiguity I need some help with staff. And I'm sure we can work it out, but I just can't be burdened with things that are already there. And that's why I said in my letter to you all, it's just an enigma to me that this has happened, and we had 30 trailers. I just want to, over time, put those back. And I have one lady named Brenda, and I think she's on here somewhere, just want us to talk to you all about bringing her trailer. And so again, without being long-winded, I know you're all busy. I don't want to make it a late evening. I just need to have some clarification as it relates to some of the current conditions that are already there, that have been there, that I want to be able to put a trailer back satisfying those current conditions and not be stuck with conditions I can't comply with. Water, sewer, I assume what we're talking about, it has to do with new trailers. But how do we deal with bringing a trailer in to an existing pad and that trailer is parallel to the street as compared to perpendicular? Is that a violation? Is that just an amendment we can do? Is it not a big issue? So I appreciate some clarification. That's probably one of the bigger issues. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
As we can discuss it, but essentially the site it's non-conforming, and to bring it into conformance, we have to meet today's code. So even though the pads were established, we'll have to look at, does it meet all of our requirements for today?
So you're saying I can't put the trailer back the way it was where it's been for 20 years?
Well, we have to look at.
I'm not trying to be sarcastic. I'm just trying to understand.
We're going to have to see proof of all these other conditions and essentially supplemental standards being met to do that.
Okay, maybe that's an offline discussion. Okay, because I don't know how to do that. I can't get water out of a rock. So I don't know how I can satisfy that condition. So I don't know who makes that decision. If that's you, director of planning. I'm just trying to be pragmatic. We want to bring in affordable housing. We want to put back 7 trailers that were there at one point that were set up the way they are. We're not reinventing the wheel, and we're putting standards on that we can work with most of them, but some of them just don't apply with the conditions. But we're not expanding. We're just reestablishing a park. We just want to put it back the way it was and provide more homes, affordable housing. That's all we're trying to do. And our idea is to sell the homes to the people. That's our goal. So again, I want to be careful. I do this quite a bit. I don't want to take the commission. I just got to understand who makes that decision and who we need to talk with. Because that is just problem. That's going to be problematic. I just can't turn a trailer. I can't bring a trailer in that doesn't fit when it was a fit before.
Okay, so we're gonna have to work with the building inspector, public works, and
figure
out all of these questions because it's just a zoning issue.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Meredith. I appreciate the clarification. Sorry, commissioners. I want to just make that a public forum, but go ahead, finish your voting. Thank you. Thank you. I think, was Brenda there, Meredith? Does Brenda want to say anything?
She is one of the attendees.
Okay. I don't know if she wanted to speak. I don't know.
Mayor, I'd like to make a comment. One is that Maple Court, is that the name of this park, years ago? It was a horrible blight on the face of North Wilkesboro for decades.
Whose phone?
I got it.
Okay. And when there was the opportunity to make an impact to improve people's lives, the people who lived there, to improve their lives, the town did so. And there were times that fire trucks were not able to access the homes. The police cars were not able to safely access the homes. The roads were in such horrible, horrible disrepair. It was just a travesty that this was a part of our town. People's yards, some people kept their yards neat and clean, but they had neighbors who never bothered to pick up their trash. And so one of the goals is to have a neighborhood trash pickup or something that would be more that Robert wouldn't have to put up with my sloppiness if I chose to just throw my trash out the door or to never mow my grass. That was how it worked for years. And probably our police and fire chiefs could comment on the condition of the roads because they were not city streets. They were maintained by the owner of the trailer court. And there was broken glass and weeds, trash, debris. Children were in danger when they were outside trying to play. It was a travesty that this was in our town, and that's why the rules are in place that are. And I think all of us would want to work with anybody who wanted to put good, low-cost housing in place there, but I don't think people may not remember what it was like. I don't think any of us would want to go back to that place, and appreciate having Meredith and town staff and the planning board and all in place to try to protect our citizens and residents. Thank you, that's all I have to say.
Meredith, I do have one other quick question on the R20 standards, because this is alluding to what Mr. Carlos is asking. The R20 standards, who set those standards? Does that come from the state or does that come within North Wilkesboro?
So the zoning ordinance is set by the commissioners. I'm sure when it was written, they echoed state requirements like state building code to make sure it matched and it wasn't, one speaking on the right side and the left side, just based on the specific language, the way it's set up with the water and the sewer. But essentially, like, the town sets these zoning ordinances, but the state building code, that's a state level. Like, that is not something we have jurisdiction over changing.
Now, the R20 is that a fairly standard zoning classification statewide?
Like a rural residential?
I mean, the other municipalities or jurisdictions may call it a different thing, but is it a general classification that's in a lot of zoning districts?
Yes, so these are considered half-acre lots or larger. So, those are like your larger single-family estate lots. Now, our R20, in that regards, with it being like subdivision requirements, ours also allows for many other uses because we recognize, there's farming out there, there's small businesses mixed in our rural community, because this is mostly in our ETJ. Like, I have not seen another property within town that's zoned this way.
Well, I think what I'm alluding to is Mr. Carlos' comment is who wrote the rules for R20 for North Wilkesboro? Because that's what I heard him basically say. And my question is the rules that our R20 has, is it consistent with this type of classification in other areas?
I'd have to do some polling to the other municipalities and counties in the area to make sure, but.
Okay, that's all I'm asking is just I hear his question as to where these rules, because, like I said, I don't want to place undue burden, but on the other side of this, if we grant a zoning request, and no disrespect to Mr. DiCarlo, but if the rules are set, his assurance to us that he won't really doesn't mean anything, because if we rezone this to this usage, then that would be allowed because it would be rezoned to that usage. So I'm just making sure that everything is above board and that, we're playing on a field that's fair, but also with understanding that if we do grant this, it has long-term consequences, whether it be pro or negative, that we have to live with our decision.
Right. So, I could pull and see what other jurisdictions have for their manufactured home park requirements.
Well, I don't think we should delay the public hearing any more than, I think we need to give this. I'm not rescinding my motion. I think we go ahead, but I think some of this information could be presented that night so that it could help us make this decision.
Okay, we can do that.
Does everybody else feel that's reasonable?
And we could still table action that night if we needed to after the public hearing. So I think that's reasonable.
Right. You would be voting on the zoning potentially after the public hearing, and you can approve, deny, or table. Those are your options.
Got a motion and a second. Okay. Have a motion and a second. All those opposed, signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, none opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. DeCarlo.
Yes, sir, thank you.
All right, thank you, guys.
Okay, Wilson. Moving on to item F from the policy.
Yes, sir. Okay, I'd like everyone to please turn to page 6 of their attachment, which looks like this. It's got a list of 9 statements. So this is the latest in our ongoing discussion of comprehensive financial policy for the town. The comments that you've given me at our previous meetings, I will incorporate into a draft policy at a later time. But for now, I'd like to go through the sections of the policy one by one. And today cover operating budget practices.
Now, Wilson, ours are not numbered, so this starts with preamble and objectives.
No, ma'am, it's a few pages after that. Oh, yes, yeah, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. It does have preamble and objectives at the top,
Okay.
and it says to be reviewed by the Board of Commissioners, August 26th. I'd like to draw your attention particularly to items 3, 4, 6, and 7. Those are the ones I think pose the biggest policy questions. But before we get into those, I'd like to go over the rest, which I think are non-controversial and are considered to be best practices in the local government budgeting community. The first is, I'll just read it for the benefit of the public. The town will develop an annual budget in conjunction with a stated program of priorities and performance objectives and measures with which to gauge progress towards meeting those objectives. Those are essentially the priorities we set at the retreat every year. That's the best practice that we already do. Water and sewer rates will be established at the appropriate level to enable the related fund, to enable the fund to be self-supported. Essentially, what that means is that the general fund won't subsidize the water fund. Skipping down to number 5. The town will pursue an aggressive policy seeking the collection of delinquent utility, license, permit, and other fees due to the town. Again, that just seems like a best practice. Number 8, the town shall take immediate corrective actions if at any time during the fiscal year, expenditure and revenue updates are such that an operating deficit is projected at year end. Corrective actions can include a hiring freeze, expenditure reductions, fee increase, or use of fund balance. Expenditure deferrals into the following fiscal year, short-term loans, or use of one-time revenue sources shall be avoided to balance the budget for recurring expenses. Again, a best practice. And finally, the tax rate will be set each year based on the cost of providing general governmental services and paid debt service. Consideration will be given to future net revenue requirements for capital improvement projects, operational expenditures, and programs debt services. So in plain language, that means that we're going to try to, if we need to increase our revenue because we see a big project down the road, we're not going to wait till that year to do it. We're going to try to do it in advance so that it's more manageable. All right, so are there any thoughts on those before we proceed? Any objections to that?
Well, sounds reasonable, the kinds of things that we have hoped to have in place through the years, and now they will be in place.
Okay, let's proceed then to the policy choices, and I'll read them all out, and then we can go through them by exception if we like. Number 3, one-time or limited duration revenues, such as the proceeds from the sale of properties, grants, gifts, etc., will not be used to fund continuing town operations, but will instead be used to fund special projects. I consider this a best practice, but not all towns do. Some of them want to maintain flexibility and are willing to take the risk of using one-time sources to fund briefly recurring expenses. All right.
But even if this were a policy, Wilson, a board, if they just felt so strongly that that policy should be ignored for some reason or another, they would have the right to do that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So the biggest effect of this would be when Connie and I put the budget together in the spring, we would never bring you a recommendation that used those one-time funds for that. You would have to proactively tell us to do that. Okay, number 4, the Board of Commissioners must approve grant applications that require a local match. Resources for local matches should be identified during the budget development process the previous year. That's the critical phrase if you ask me, because it takes away a little bit of our flexibility to apply for grants in the middle of the fiscal year. We would need to have planned for those already and budgeted the local match. So that's a policy choice to think about. I want to skip over number 6 because that's the biggest one in my opinion. To number 7, the town shall endeavor to reduce its reliance on property tax revenues by revenue diversification, implementation of user fees, and economic development. And I'll give you an example of revenue diversification. Andrew's proposal from a few meetings ago that we explore the possibility of levying a hotel tax in North Wilkesboro. Now, what we're discovering is that they really wouldn't yield that much money, but it's an option available to us that we could use to make a little bit of revenue and take the burden off of the general fund for travel-related expenses. So that's an example, although a small one, of revenue diversification. This guideline would ask us to explore more of those possibilities. All right, and then finally, number 6, for services that benefit specific users, the city shall establish and collect fees to recover the cost of those services. The Board of Commissioners shall determine the appropriate cost recovery level when establishing user fees. Where feasible and desirable, the town shall seek to recover full direct and indirect costs. User fees shall be reviewed on a regular basis to calculate their full cost recovery attainment levels, to compare them to the current fee structure, and to recommend adjustments where necessary. So essentially what we're saying is if we provide a service that only benefits an individual, we're going to make sure that they bear most of the cost of that service. If you don't do that, then the general taxpayer is subsidizing a service that benefits only an individual. So the policy decision here is this: you can ask to recover 100% and put the burden directly on the person receiving the benefit. You can subsidize it at 90% and say they're getting most of the benefit, but there's some public benefit to this service, so we'll subsidize it a little bit. Or you can do the opposite, which I don't think many towns do, and say there's a great public benefit to all these services, whether an individual is enjoying the benefit or not, and we'll subsidize all of it. I don't think that's the way to go, but perhaps somewhere in the middle. But that's for you all to decide. But either way, what we do is we start exploring the degree to which our fees cover the cost of various services, and bring back next year in our budget proposal an adjusted fee schedule if necessary. So that's the big one in my opinion. That's the one with the most significant policy question. So I'll be quiet now and listen to you all's thoughts on 3, 4, 6, and 7.
I really like number 4, Wilson, that the board must approve grant applications that require a local match. Because I remember at least half the board wasn't here at that point in time. We had a great grant, a Part F grant for recreation. And we would have loved to have had it, but it required 50% match. And really, we just didn't have a way to cope with it that year. And I know we ahead of time and having it in the budget would have been an asset, and we'd probably have a great asset for the town, but we don't do that.
Well, no, never correct me if I'm wrong, but if we have that policy, that eliminates our ability on the fly, because we would have had to have a budget amendment for that current fiscal year already in place before we could approve that, am I correct?
Well, so couldn't the board that was in place at that time say, you know, this is important enough to us that we're gonna waive that policy at this time? Is that,
Yes,
could it
ma'am.
work that easily?
It could, yes, ma'am.
But it just means that most of the time, well, department heads may not have been thinking at that time, we need to alert the board that we're asking for this, and
I mean, I'm like you, Debbie, I hate to see any opportunity to grab a grant. And all I just was making sure of is that we don't tie our hands.
Yeah,
Because I am very concerned about revenue streams, and so I do not want to have the town, the board's hands hampered by not being able to actively pursue any income revenue stream we can find.
yeah, I do understand and support that completely, Michael. But if they can let the board know ahead of time, so it can be budgeted, it
I'm
helps.
good with that, just want you.
So let me ask then a clarifying question. So there's kind of two different directions there. First, the Board of Commissioners must approve grant applications that require a local match. It sounds like y'all want that to be in there. You don't want us going out and applying for 100 grants without consulting you all. So that part's
I don't
non-controversial.
know, going out and applying for them is not necessarily, I mean, because you can apply for them. I would love to see proactiveness in applying for them.
Me
Okay.
too.
But I mean, before, yes, I do think eventually if it was going to require public citizen money, that we should, but
Okay.
I don't think if it's out there, go for it.
All right. So I'm going to say grant acceptance.
If it's $500,000, you know, it's helpful to know ahead of time, it might be coming.
Okay.
Like,
All right, so I want to focus in on the second statement. Resources for local matches should be identified during the budget development process the previous year. So I haven't heard a consensus on that one yet.
That concerns me as far as flexibility.
well, I guess it would give the board the resources, identifying the resources for local matches would give the board some level of comfort in knowing that if Wilson were to bring a $500,000 match, that there might be some routes to funding that. Is the way I read that.
Wilson, with the way that grants are timed and stuff, I mean, could this create such a situation where we might miss an opportunity?
Yes. So perhaps the board would consider setting a threshold and saying, you know, grants below a certain amount, the staff can do, you know, without identifying the local match a year in advance. But if it's going to be something big that, you know, maybe it's $100,000 or more, those we try to plan for in advance.
Well, like the others, I don't want us to miss anything either. And I feel like we missed that grant years ago because we had not had a chance to plan for it. And that was my thinking, that I don't want us to miss it.
All right, let me tinker with the language on that one to see if I can capture sort of what the board's feedback is. And next time around, if you don't sort of like where I land on, we can talk about it some more, we can take it out. And then just on the administrative level, I'll tell staff, you know, don't come to me with a, you know, $150,000 match in the middle of the year. Let's try to think about that as we're putting the budget together. So it'll be a practice we follow, but not necessarily policy. Okay, we can go to 7. The town shall endeavor to reduce its reliance on property tax revenue by revenue diversification, implementation of user fees, and economic development. What's the Group's thought on that. Michael,
like
give a
that.
thumbs up. Okay.
I like it.
No objection to that. All right, then, let's go to number 6. So to me, like I said, I think that's the biggest policy question. I'm curious to hear what you all think. I will confess right away that one sort of criteria that I didn't include in the statement, but that could be included, is comparison to neighboring municipalities. Because we might discover that we need to increase a fee to recover all the costs, but that doing so puts us out of alignment with our neighbors and makes us uncompetitive. Now, most of the fees I'm talking about here are minor. It's not thousands and thousands of dollars, it's tens. But if we discover that collecting all the costs, makes us much more expensive than our neighbors, so maybe we consider that before we raise the fee.
Do we have a current user fee criteria in place now?
I don't think so, no, sir.
Can you think of an example that's not too awkward?
Permit fees. The fee you pay when you come to rezone. The fee you pay to get your building inspected. In fact, I'll just spill the beans. If we go forward with this, that's probably the first one we're gonna do. And he's got pages, if you look at the fee schedule, the building inspection's got pages and pages of stuff. Like electrical inspection, plumbing. And so we want to make sure that we capture the full cost of that service that we provide.
Do most communities charge for their services?
All communities charge for the service, as far as I know. It's just a matter of how much they charge.
Because we're in fact charging because our taxpayers are paying the salary of the enforcement officer.
That's correct.
But,
So I can't, I confess that I can't tell you right now if our fees are adequate or not, if they cover the full expense. But I'm interested to hear if you all think it's important enough for us to make sure that our fees are adequate to recover most of the costs.
I'd like to know what other communities do. I wouldn't want us to be the only people in North Carolina that charge for some of these things, but surely we want to charge if most other people are charging. We do need the revenue.
I agree.
Oh, I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
Let's say, I'm open to the idea of this, but I want to make sure that we're not nickel and diming people who are paying property taxes on buildings and things that could cover some of these things, if that makes sense.
Yes, sir.
Well, my question would be, do you have a back, as you like to use an analogy, back of the napkin math, do you have an idea of, because again, we're looking at perception to our citizens. If we were to impose these fees and increase these fees, do we recoup enough revenue for the potential negative impact that it could have? Because I just heard you talk about, the building inspector. Well, here we are, we talk development, homes, housing, all of that. Well, all of that user fee that you're talking about gets piled on to a builder. And if you've got a builder that's trying to build spec homes, for example, that's a fee that he's incurring. And so I just want to, my thing is does the implementation warrant the reward for the perception to the public of increasing these fees? That's all right.
Yes, sir. Understood.
I guess I feel like some things should be included. I know this, correct me, Wilson, if this is a bad example, but last year when we were talking about expenses to stormwater drains, I feel like maybe you mentioned that you could do a fee for people in that area or something to use that. Would that be an example?
Excuse me one second while I make this note.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That would be an extreme example. There are examples of other towns that have a enterprise for their stormwater, which means their stormwater system operates much like our utility system. And it's funded only with the fees that they pay. I'm not suggesting we do that. And I think we'd have to get legislation if we wanted to do that. I'm suggesting that we make sure that the fees we have already established are adequate enough to cover most of the expenses of providing that service. So that the taxpayers aren't subsidizing a service that mainly benefits an individual. And Michael has articulated perhaps the main reason for not doing that. And that is sometimes private individuals are doing something that benefits everybody, such as providing affordable housing. And so we don't want to burden them with too high a fee when they're doing something that has a vast benefit. And so I appreciate and understand that feedback, Commissioner Parsons, but I think what I'm hearing the board saying is that they'd like to know a little bit more about the level to which other municipalities recover the cost of their services for fees to make sure that we're not doing anything out of the ordinary. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, understood. All right, so I think we've covered all of them. Is there any other comments that others have on any of these?
This is not totally on this, but it is on our financial policy, and it reminded me when you mentioned other communities. I still would like to see a number for like other communities around us that are similar to what they're doing with their fund balance.
Yes, sir. We'll certainly have that when we get to the fund balance section.
Thanks.
Anything else? This? If not, we'll move on down to item number I don't have anything.
Item G, Mayor. Item G.
Yes.
You're good. So Dale leaves big shoes to fill, and I don't think we're gonna fill them tonight, but I'd like to take at least one of the procedural steps that we need to do to fill his shoes. And that is to carry out something that we've discussed previously, and that is to split the public service position back up into public utilities and public works director positions. I think that that will give both of those departments more focused leadership and perhaps improve their effectiveness. I feel like if Dale unbuttoned his plaid shirt and went like this, he'd have the red S underneath. But even he would admit that it was too big a job for one person. So I'd like for the board to consider amending the position classification plan to eliminate public services director and to reinstate public utilities director and public works director. But before you do that, there's another action, and this is what's on your updated item G sheet. I'm recommending that after we do this, we also enhance the public utilities position job description a little bit. The reason I'm recommending that is because on the horizon, the utilities department has a number of very significant capital projects that they need to work through. And those capital projects could require a reassessment of our rates. Those capital projects could require renegotiation of contracts with the water associations. And they most certainly will require regulatory, grant, and all sorts of administrative compliance issues. And so I think that the public utilities director's administrative responsibilities need to be enhanced. And so I've submitted to you an updated job description that focuses more on the administrative responsibilities of the position than our previous job description did. And I'd like to draw your attention to a couple of points in the job description to show what I mean. The first is the last line of the summary paragraph. The special emphasis on overseeing capital improvements to maintain and enhance the town's water system. In the knowledge, skills, and abilities, there's references to knowledge about utilizing software in the business practice, ability to understand and direct utility rate analysis and allocation cost, and so forth. So because we're enhancing that position's responsibilities, I think it also needs to have a corresponding increase in salary. And so if we turn to the last page that looks like this, this is a quick comparison of two neighboring municipalities. One is about our size, the other is a little bit bigger than us, but not terribly so. And what they pay their public utilities director. Now, I will confess that there's not a unanimous model on how to do it. A lot of the other towns about our size, we're doing what we're doing, what we were doing, which is having one person oversee the public utilities and the public works. But these two towns that I'm referencing here have distinct public utilities directors. And I think we need to follow that model just because of the work that's on the horizon that I described. So the first comparison, their public utilities director gets paid $87,000. That's a little high, but he's been there for forever. So most of that is just his longevity. The second comparison in the far right column, their actual range for the public utilities position is 80 to 115,000. But when you adjust that number to factor in the higher salaries that are paid in that town across the board, because it's larger, you get a range of 57,600 to 82,800, which I think is about where we need to be. And so I'm suggesting that we increase the range of that position from 45,000 to 72,000 to 65,000 to 85,000.
Wilson, what towns are these?
One of them is Wilkesboro and one of them is Lenore.
Thanks.
I think it's important that we be competitive when we're looking for candidates. And that our, yeah, we have to be competitive. This is different because we had the job combined so long.
How much extra a year is it going to cost the town to split that job into two jobs?
Well, it depends on who we hire. And I know you all have given me some feedback on that. And, you know, I'd like to talk at a later time about our strategy for filling both of those positions. But it depends on who we hire. If we hire both of them from within, it won't cost us as much as if we hire someone from without, because the policy states that if you promote someone from within, their pay increase is capped. If you hire someone from without, you just find the competitive salary and offer them that. And it may or may not be higher than the internal candidate gets. So it depends. But the good news is that I think that with vacancies and with the time in between Dale's retirement and when we fill these positions permanently, we'll create enough salary savings to be able to make up the difference for this year. And then in subsequent years, we'll have to bump up both of those salary lines, I don't know, 10% for that position to be able to afford having two.
I mean, is it going to cost us 20,000 more a year or 100,000 more a year? I mean, do you have an idea for ballpark?
In the $30,000 range per year more.
And the reason we overburdened Dale all these years, I mean, he was a good town soldier, you know, he was willing to take on extra responsibility for what probably wasn't sufficient money because we needed to save money. We actually lost 1/4 of our property tax income the year that change was made. So we had to do things differently and things where there's not a lot of money now, but it's time to be fair. And as he said, this is too big a job for one person.
Yeah, I'm maybe sounding like I'm nickel and diming. I'm asking questions. I'm just, when I look at our budget, I see that things are really tight and, you know, $50,000 a year over 30 years is $1.5 million. So we need to always watch our numbers.
Yeah.
All right, so the one correction that I mentioned earlier to item G is that I state at the bottom in the action that refining the salary range would require employee comment. But the more staff and I looked at that, we concluded that by just adjusting the salary range, that's not a new policy, that's just administration of the current policy. And the current policy assigns me as the administrator and you all as the decision maker. If we were changing the policy, say, doing away with ranges, then we would want employee comment. But since this is just administering the policy and changing something that's going to affect one position, we don't think it requires employee comment. And that you all can take action on it right away if you would.
Mayor, I make a motion that we amend the position classification plan to eliminate public services director and reinstate distinct public utilities director and public works director positions.
Motion. Need a second.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion or comments? Okay, all those in favor, signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, none opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Jefferson.
Any action on the second, or do we want to talk about that one? Some more?
About what?
On the second bullet on the page there, amending the pay plan to increase the salary range.
We need to be competitive.
Well, if we go ahead and approve this, and you can begin to look to advertise for the position and interview employees.
I'd like to, yeah, we'll start thinking about a strategy and I'll bring it back to you all for approval at our next meeting.
Can we possibly just table that salary range thing to let it, since he's not going to, I mean, we're going to create the position, now we're just figuring out how to fund it and what amount of money we can do for it, so I mean, can we just,
I agree, Mike.
if we can just kind of let that mull over, because again, with Andrew, we need to be competitive. It's also a big position, but it's also, again, we got to be able to pay for it. And that's just, instead of making a decision tonight, it's not going to really change your timetable if we waited until the next meeting to make that decision, would it?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's just my suggestion.
I agree.
Sounds reasonable.
Also, I just want to say, you know, I brought up the cost of it and stuff like that does concern me, but I will say by having the job split into two positions, I mean, it could allow for some efficiencies to save some money, but also maybe things to be done. I'm thinking more not about the water, but the work side of things, maybe be done to a little more detail, higher level, higher expectations. And that makes me be able to swallow a cost on that a little bit better. Just thought I'd mention that.
Sir, you got it.
Okay. We don't have to vote. All right. Section. Town manager, evaluation completion work plan. Do that, please.
All right, on behalf of the board, we met and had a discussion about the town manager's evaluation. And I'm happy to report that the board gave our current town manager, Wilson Hooper, a satisfactory evaluation, and look forward to working with him in this next coming year to make things better. So I just wanted to put on record that he received a satisfactory evaluation and that his wife can continue to plant flowers.
Any other comments or discussion? Thank you, Michael.
All right, so I've passed out my draft work plan for the coming year. I put this together based on the feedback that you all gave me, but also on the priorities you set during the retreat in the spring.
Something I don't know.
I'm sorry, I think they're still making their way down.
That is something. Oh,
Did I not?
there's
Wow.
another one too.
All right, so the first is, and I sent this to Andrew earlier, so he has it. I've set 5 targets for the coming year. And each of them has sub goals and milestones and so forth that will work towards. The first is significant progress on your priorities. So I don't think those can be ignored in my work plan because I'm the guy that's charged to carry those out. So I want to include those specifically in the work plan. So that's page 1. I described it as make significant and tangible progress on the 5 priorities named by the Board of Commissioners in their March 2021 retreat: water system, public safety facilities, traffic calming, paving and stormwater, and streetscapes beautification. And then further on down the page, I gave some examples of targets to strive for during the year. All right, moving on to page 2. Based on your feedback, enhance information sharing with elected officials and increase responsiveness to their request. So the brief description, and you all can read more of the rationale, is to provide regular updates to elected officials on matters of concern to them, work to maintain momentum and thus more timely completion of one-off projects prioritized by the board. So the feedback was, during the current year, I got focused on the bigger priorities and sometimes lost track of the small ones. So that's this is an effort to try to improve on that. All right, next page. Related to the separate goal will be greater community visibility. Improve my public visibility in order to build trust among community members, enhance the organization's transparency, and ensure that the work of the organization meets the needs of the community. And we talked during our briefing about some strategies for doing that. All right, turning the page, quality of life initiative, active management on quality of life projects like the mural, town appearance, and park improvements. So those are priorities that emerged during the year that you'd like for me to focus on. And then finally, and this is the newest one, and I alluded to this briefly during our feedback session, but here's a longer description. PELA Leadership Development Plan. So I'm currently participating in the school government's Public Executive Leadership Academy. And it essentially helps managers develop their soft skills. We've got hard skills. We know how to put the budget together. We know how to do evaluations. Those are the sort of hard skills in this job. But the way the management profession is evolving, it's requiring more soft skills of people. And so this class helps managers develop those. And what it requires of its participants is to put together a post-Pella professional development plan that you'll work through with a coach from the school government. And it'll ask you to do things like identify areas that you need to improve the plan, meet with your coach frequently, and accomplish an adaptive change project, which means a project that sort of helps you and your organization take a step into an uncomfortable area that you might not have, that you need to address, but might not have had the, moxie to do before. And so I put here on my work plan to follow through with this leadership plan, this coaching, and this adaptive change project as a way to refine my soft skills and advance the needs of the organization. The positive thing about that for the organization is that I think it'll benefit us by making me better at my job. It'll benefit me because it gives me credit towards ICMA credentialed manager status, which is a nice professional designation that folks in my industry have that I'm seeking, but that requires a lot of prerequisites for, and this will help me accomplish all of this.
Wilson, I'd like to say kudos to you. In my 16th year, I've never seen a manager attend to what was the information that came from a board with such a plan, and it's nothing but good news for town of North Wilkesboro, and thank you so much for what you've done. Good luck with working on it.
Absolutely. I think this really it's really pops out there and sets exactly the goals we needed. And I like because it's concise. You didn't hand us a book. And I appreciate that.
So if there are no objections, I'll take the draft off this and start working on these goals.
Wilson, I know we mentioned this before, but is there any way for us to do, I can't remember kind of what we decided or talked about, but to make it so that our work retreat goals line up more with your work plan for the year, because it's such a similar thing. And instead of having like, okay, you've got 6 months and now you've got this work plan, but maybe have more like 10 months of time that you're evaluated on yearly that lines up with our goals. I mean, would that be helpful for you, or what are your thoughts on that?
It would be helpful. And so I think that's something worth considering. But I think the reason why it's not been done is because typically evaluations take place around the turn of the fiscal year in case there's any compensation adjustments related to it. You're not going to be able to give me or anyone else a compensation adjustment in March. The second reason is because my employment contract says that my evaluation is to take place in August. And of course, we can amend that if you all wish to do that. Perhaps next year is the time to do that because it'll be the end of my initial 3-year term. But it would require an amendment to that contract. But yes, aligning my evaluation and my goal setting with the March retreat would be helpful.
I think that we should do that.
Anything else? Alrighty, moving on into getting finished. We need to go into the closed session for Danny.
We have emerging issues, Mayor, if anyone.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Anybody got anything they want to
I
discuss?
just want to make one statement. I don't know if anybody has seen the pictures coming out of our speedway, but what has been done out there over the last couple of weeks, especially by all of the volunteers from across the county, has been nothing more than amazing. For the first time, and I cannot remember how long, you can actually see one of the crown jewels of Wilkes County from 421 now.
Yeah.
You know, they created a lot of kindling and a lot of mulch, I guess, from all that tree debris and everything, but I just want to say, I'm sure some of the volunteers are from our town, but just as a citizen of North Wilkesboro and a member of this community, I want to recognize the job that has been done at our speedway, and it's all moving in the right direction, and I hope for great success in the future.
Thank you, Michael, but all the volunteers were from the fire departments throughout the county. There were no individuals other than firemen.
Well, okay, then duly noted that it was our volunteer fire.
Those are all the firemen throughout the whole county, every fire department. So anyway, yeah, kudos to them and appreciate it very much. Thank you, Michael. Okay. Close session.